Grace Judson here, self-proclaimed proud leadership geek, and actually I'm going to talk about something a little different today. I'm going to talk about why leadership development programs fail. Okay, it's not that unusual for a company to allocate budget, devote the resources, the time, the effort, all of that, and then not really get the results that they expected or wanted. So let's look at 5 reasons why this happens. And really quickly before I go on with that, I post videos to YouTube a couple times a month, maybe a little bit of an irregular schedule. But if you want to be notified about when I post a video, especially since it is a little bit of an irregular schedule, go ahead and subscribe and click the notifications bell so that you are notified and you will know when I post. Okay, let's look at those 5 reasons why leadership programs sometimes fail. First one is a really big one, and that is that you didn't define what success was. What does success look like for your leadership team, for the people who participate in it, whether you call them emerging leaders, whether it's your first line managers, whether it's your mid-level managers? What will they do differently? How will they behave? How will their teams respond to their leadership? If you don't define these things, and including how you will measure them, you're probably not going to get the results you wanted because you won't really know what you wanted. Second thing is that training isn't always the answer. I think any of us in the training and development field will tell you of any number of times where senior leadership or even mid-level managers will say, okay, we need to do some training because we have X problem. There is often an impulse to just kind of throw training at a problem when in fact the problem has not been adequately understood. And there may be some systemic or situational things at play that mean that training isn't going to solve the problem. So if you don't fully understand the problem before you decide to do training, of any sort, really, leadership or anything else, again, you're probably not going to get the results that you expect or want. So that's the second challenge here. Sometimes it's very simply the wrong training. There are a lot of great leadership development programs out there, and there are a lot of options if you want to go, looking out there for an off-the-shelf program, or if you want to bring in someone to custom develop a program for you. I'm going to say that many of the name brand programs, they are excellent, but they are also typically fairly pricey, both in terms of actual dollar cost and in terms of the amount of time that your people will need to dedicate to completing the program. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And if you have the resources and the program's defined process, their curriculum, the results that you can expect align with what you have defined as success, remember point number 1 here, great. However, what I often see is that people will look at these programs and think that they are the only option or that they are the best option. And if you're not going to go for the best, then unfortunately what often happens is that people will say, well, we can't afford the time or the money for that right now, so we're not going to do it right now. But if you have defined training as the right answer to the outcome that you want, based on 1 and 2 that I've already gone over here, then not doing the training is not a great answer. Your first line managers and leaders have the biggest impact of anybody on your individual employee population. They're the ones, that's why they're called first line, right? They're the ones there in the trenches with them. And if they are not leading effectively, that impacts your overall organizational effectiveness. And if you want to build strong leadership going forward, if you want a strong leadership bench strength, right? A little redundancy there, but why not? Because it is important. If you want to have people who are ready to be promoted into senior level management, you have to develop them in the beginning. You have to give them the resources to have good leadership habits right from the start. So I will leave a link both to an article I wrote about free or low-cost training options and also to a video I did on that same subject in the video description down below. But my point is, no training should not be an option if you have identified training as something that your people need. So you need to explore options beyond the brand name pricey options. Back when I was in corporate in a technology role, we used to say that people would buy IBM because it was very easy to justify. If things went wrong, they could still say, and this is probably dating myself, but they could still say, we bought an IBM machine. We went to IBM for consulting or whatever it might be because IBM was the big name. And that's very tempting, but I urge you not to fall into that trap. If it happens to be right according to all the other criteria, go for it. But if not, look for options. Okay, more than enough said on the subject of wrong training. So, fourth issue, you're training the wrong person. Again, I will leave a link to this particular article down below in the video description. But this is where I go out on a bit of a limb because Gallup is the recognized expert in a lot of this stuff, but they claim that only 1 person out of 10 has the natural ability to be a leader and that maybe 2 out of the remaining 9 can be trained to be a good leader. I disagree with that. But where I see a problem is that even today, many corporate career paths assume that people are going to advance into leadership. But what about the person who just really loves the nitty-gritty work that they are doing and don't want to go into leadership? They want to stay in their specialized role, but they also don't want to be cut off from advancing on a career path of some sort. If we don't give those people any other option but to go into leadership, what we end up with is the wrong people in leadership. And it is true at that point that you can train them, but they may improve incrementally. They're not going to be the good leaders that you need in your organization. So don't train the wrong people. Give them other options. Finally, you've done the training. You've chosen your success criteria. You understand what success looks like and how you're going to determine if you've actually been successful. You know what your measurements are going to be. You have picked the right program. You have picked the right people. You know all of this. But if you don't offer long-term support after the training is over, especially if the training is of relatively short duration, such as some of those free options, which can be long or short. If you don't offer support afterwards, whether it's coaching or peer circles or mentorship, it is really hard. I think we have all had the experience of going to a workshop or attending a conference and coming back just really pumped up with great ideas and new knowledge, and we get back to our desks and either we just sort of automatically slip back into old habits, forget to use these new skills that we haven't practiced enough, or sit there and it's like, how do I do this again? How does this apply to what I'm actually doing in my day-to-day work? What my husband calls gain speed decisions. You know, you're out there in the middle of the fray of the day-to-day work, and leadership is full of really quick stuff that is often flying at you. It is hard to stop and remember how to apply a new skill. The brain likes habits, and the brain has to be sort of convinced to learn new habits. So if you're not offering the kind of support people need, then you're not going to be successful in the long term. So there are the 5 things that you need to think about when you are setting yourself up for success in a leadership program. Defining what success actually is and how you'll measure it. Making sure that training is the right answer and making sure that you pick the right training. Making sure that you pick the right people to be trained. And then making sure that you offer support in learning how to apply the skills and the tools that they have been taught. There you have it. Lots of material down below, lots of material also always on my website. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If there are any other things that you have experienced that have caused your leadership training programs not to work, whether you have been a participant in one and see a flaw in how it's been done, or you have delivered them and seen flaws in how it's been applied. Also, of course, if you've got some success factors that you'd like to let people know about. And always, if you have any questions, I am always available to answer questions and come back and check comments regularly. So there you have it. Take care and go forth and do good and successful leadership training.